The next class we're going to talk about are osteichthyes. And learning those stems in English class are super important, especially with science, because you can break words down to see what they mean. For instance, oste means bones. You've heard of older people who break their bones easy. They may have osteoporosis, which means they have bones that have pores or holes in them. So if you look at osteichthyes, ich meaning fish, this is going to be bony fish, okay? And these are all of your fish like tuna, perch, bass, clownfish, and we could just go on and on and on, okay? So one of the most successful groups on Earth ever. They have an endoskeleton made of bones. You guys should know that here because you're eating some trout or bass or something that you caught here and your mom says, oh, watch out for the bones. Meaning don't, sometimes you can't get all the bones out before you cook them. They have what's called a swim bladder, and usually they engage in external fertilization and being oviparous. Oviparous meaning the fish lay eggs. Well, think caviar. That's what caviar is fish eggs. Okay, so they lay the eggs and then they are externally fertilized by the males in water. Okay, they do have a lateral line system. Most all the fish are bilateral symmetry. Their scales are different from those that are in sharks, so just remember that. They have a two-chambered heart, and this osteichthyes does not include sharks. Okay, so don't we always say, oh, a shark is a fish. Just wait on that one. Okay, their water balance is important. So some fish excrete salt through their gills, and others excrete a watery nitrogenous waste using their kidneys. They have to maintain their salt balance in their water. In their body, and because a lot of them, the ones that are not freshwater, the ones that are in salt water, they're going to have to maintain that using a balance system. All right, the next class is Chondrichthyes. Now these are going to be your sharks and rays. Okay, they have an endoskeleton as well, but their endoskeleton is not hard calcium bone like the other fish or like us. They're made of cartilage, so their entire skeleton is that flexible material like is in your ears and in your nose. They had paired fins. Obviously, they have jaws, thus the awesome name for that movie. And they have a two-chambered heart as well. They have a very well-developed sense of sight and smell. They have a lateral line system for sensing pressure changes, vibrations in the water. Their whole body acts like kind of an ear. That's why they're so great at hunting. They have unique scales, and their teeth might actually even be modified scales. Sharks are also oviparous. They can also be ovoviviparous, and a few of them are viviparous. So we have like a big array in this group, in this class. You have some that lay eggs, some that have live birth. They also have internal fertilization using these claspers to deposit the sperm in female reproduction tract. So go ahead and pause the video if you need to get caught up on this class. Okay, the next class that we see is Amphibia. These classes are more understandable, more, these. I mean, you've heard of amphibians ever since you were little and you played with frogs. So from this point forward, most of the class names are going to be things that you understand or recognize. Frogs, toads, salamanders, and newts, okay? These guys are ectotherms. Remember, we talked about that on the previous video. Ecto meaning that their heat comes from outside of them and that their body conforms to what the outside environment is. So they're going to have to warm their bodies up, okay? These guys need water for breeding, okay? They also go through what's called a metamorphosis. They start as a tadpole and then change into a frog over time. They have this gas exchange. Our gas exchange is our lungs. We breathe in oxygen, we exchange the CO2 as garbage, and we exhale it out. Their gas exchange is through their moist skin and their mouth. They have primitive balloon-like lungs, but nonetheless they do have lungs. They do an external fertilization, means outside of their body, okay? So, and they're oviparous, which they would have to be for external fertilization. So they lay these eggs, and then they are fertilized by the male where they're laid. So let's say there's a little muddy area. The female would lay her eggs, and then the male would fertilize those eggs where they're laying, and then they would develop. They have a 3-chambered heart, and so they're a little more organized, a little more developed. They have chromatophores on the skin for their coloration, and as well as poison glands for defense. You've heard of like the poison dart frogs and some of these other frogs that are toxic or poisonous. And then you can sit there and read about their urine if you want to. The most important things that I think for this class are the ones that are boxed in red. And if you would go ahead and pause the video and write those few things down, that would be great. The next class is Reptilia, or reptiles. Okay, these are going to be turtles, snakes, lizards, crocodiles, etc. Okay, these guys are also ectotherms. Ecto meaning they conform to the environment, so they're cold-blooded, and so they've got to warm their bodies up externally. So they like to bask and hide in the sun to regulate their temperature. They have scaly, waterproof skin. They respirate through lungs only, so they're not going to respirate through their skin as well like frogs. They're only going to breathe in and out through their lungs. Okay. They have internal fertilization, but then they lay their eggs as well. Some species are viviparous, which means they have live babies as well. They have a 3- or 4-chambered heart, depending upon the species. And then they, when they go to the bathroom, when they urinate, they basically have a paste that comes out rather than a liquid. And the reason why they do this is to conserve liquid in their body. They keep the water that's the base of urine, they store that in their body and not get rid of it. And then they just pass the other toxins, which are usually mixed with the water when we have for urine. They keep the water in and then pass the other toxins as a paste. You also have extinct reptiles, which include dinosaurs, etc. You can read that at the bottom. Pause the video now and make sure that you get the things in green written down. The next class is Aves. And you say, well, I thought this was going to be, they were all going to sound familiar, Miss Berkmeyer. I mean, Aves doesn't sound anything like birds. But if you think about what birds do, they fly. And flying is aviation. Aviation is like the study in the industry of planes and flying and etc. And birds fly. So class Aves, these guys are endothermic, which means they regulate their body temperature. They have a 4-chambered heart. They have internal fertilization, but then they lay those fertilized eggs. Those eggs are oviparous. So they are oviparous, meaning egg layers. Boy, I can't talk today. They have these amniotic eggs that have this calcium or hard shells. Okay. They also pass their waste in like a paste as well because they want to save the water in their bodies. They have beaks and claws that are modified for their specific niche, which means, and this is like the excellent example of Darwin's finches. On the Galapagos Islands, they studied Darwin's finches, and these are those finches that their beaks varied. Some beaks were longer, which they were modified because they had to get a deeper source of food. Some beaks were shorter, some beaks were wider. And so their beaks and claws on all these different species of birds are going to be specific for what role they play or where they live. Okay? They were also classified as reptiles by a lot of taxonomists, which is interesting. And then you hear that whole theory about the dinosaurs being more bird-like than reptiles and things like that. So it's pretty interesting taxonomy. Their digestive system is a modified for a diet including a crop and a gizzard. Those things help them process their food. Okay, so go ahead and pause here and write down the things that you think are important, but make sure you also include those green boxed characteristics.